Hello and welcome back to my kitchen. Today by request I'm going to be showing you how to pickle and can your very own pickled asparagus. I am by no means a expert on home canning and preservation. I'm only going to be showing you what I do to preserve these. I will be taking all my times and ingredient amounts from the all-new Ball Book of Canning and Home Preserving. And I highly recommend that if you want to get into the home preservation of foods, to check out those books as well as the National Home Food and Preservation Society website, where they have gone into extensive detail on testing of what foods are safe to can at home and what foods are not. The ingredients we're going to need for this are 7 pounds of asparagus spears, 1 liter of water, 5 cups of white vinegar, a half of a cup of pickling and preserving salt, or if you don't want to use that, you can use kosher salt. Just don't use iodized salt. It is not recommended for home canning. I've also got a 2/3 cup of sugar. I've sliced up some sweet garden snacking peppers. I had these fresh out of my garden. I thought I'd throw them in. But these are totally optional. You could also replace this with jalapenos if you wanted something a bit spicier. I've got 6 cloves of garlic that I've peeled and crushed. I've got some pickle fresh, which is actually optional as well, but I like to help preserve the crispness of the asparagus by using this, so I will be adding it. I've got some dill seed, some oregano, whole black peppercorns, and I've got some mustard seeds. And those are all of our ingredients. The first thing I'm going to do is move my asparagus out of the way for the minute and bring in a pot so we can start heating up our brine. And I'm going to start by adding in my white vinegar and my 1 liter of water, as well as my salt and sugar. All I'm going to do is stir these just a little bit, and I'm going to place this over on my stove so it can come up to a boil and the salt and the sugar can completely dissolve. Before I start prepping the rest of these asparagus spears, I do want to go over some of the extra equipment that you're going to need. Starting with our jars, I've got a 1.5 pint size ball canning jar here that I've gone ahead and sanitized, and the ones I'm going to be using today are sitting over in my water bath canner on the stove, staying warm. I've checked the rims of each one to make sure that there are no chips or cracks that could prevent a proper seal, and no flaws in my jars that could cause them to shatter when they hit the hot water and ruining our product. So enough about the jars. I'm going to move on to the lids that you're going to need. You'll need 6 of these. You'll also need 6 jars, and you'll need 6 rims to help hold our lids on. I've got a little bit of extra vinegar that I'm going to use to wipe off the rims after we get everything inside the jar and before we put our lids on. You'll need a funnel of some kind to help funnel the brine in when we ladle it over with our ladle. I've got something here that can help me debubble it, and I've also got a jar lifter that will help me put the hot jars into the water as well as removing them. And I've got some towels here that will help protect the jars from the coolness of my counter. We don't want any thermal shock. So let me get this stuff out of the way for right now, and then I'll go over prepping our asparagus spears. The last thing I do want to say about my lids is the only thing I've done with these is wash them in warm soapy water and then stack them up. These do not need to go in boiling water or warm water. They are the Sure Seal type of lid. Alright, let's get those out of the way, and then I'm going to bring in the rest of these asparagus spears. These are the only ones I have not prepped today, and the way I did them is I start by breaking off the woody end at the bottom, and then I took them and measured them against my jar, and you want them to end right at the bottom of this second rim that's on the jar. That will give you exactly 1 inch of head space when you pack your jars, which I've done that with this one. This one is perfectly sized. So what I've done is I've just gone through and stacked them all up against this very asparagus spear. That was kind of awkward to say. And then I'm going to go ahead and continue doing that with the rest of these. And like I said, my other ones are already done. And in the bowl, alright, there we go. I can set those off to the side. And then for my stems, I'm actually not going to throw these away. I'm going to put these on a dehydrator tray and dehydrate them and then grind them up into asparagus powder. And these will make a lovely creamed asparagus soup sometime later this winter. Alright guys, the first thing I'm going to do is drop in one of my garlic cloves that I've crushed. Kind of got broken up. And then I'm going to take my asparagus spears and start lining the outside of the jar. And I'm going to keep going like this all the way around until I get the whole circumference filled in. And then I'll start stuffing the rest of those into the middle. That way we get a nice tightly packed jar of asparagus spears. Now that I have as many asparagus spears in here as I'm going to get, I'm going to drop a few of my red pepper, well, my sweet snacking peppers in here. And then I'm going to also add in, let me start with our pickle crisp. I'm going to add in 1/8 of a teaspoon of that. So that was 1/8 of a teaspoon of pickle crisp. I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of our dill seeds. 1 teaspoon of oregano. And 1/2 of a teaspoon of black peppercorn. You could also add 1/2 to 1 teaspoon of red pepper flakes in here if you wanted a spicier pickle. And those are all the seasonings we're going to be adding in. Alright guys, so all we have left to do is pour our brine in until it reaches 1 inch of head space. Now that I have my brine in, I'm going to take my chopstick and I'm going to gently push it down the sides of our jar to remove any air bubbles that could have been trapped in there. You want to remove the air bubbles as much as you can. This will also help our asparagus spears sort of settle down into the jar. But the reason you don't want air bubbles in your canned goods is it can promote the growth of the bad bacteria that we're trying to avoid. I'm happy with how that looks, so I'm going to dip a paper towel into our extra white vinegar and just go around the rim to make sure there's no seasonings or anything sticking to it that would prevent a good seal. Now that I've done that, I'm going to add my lid and my ring, and I'm going to tighten it to just fingertip tight. You don't want it too tight. You just want to be able to remove it with your fingertips. That's good enough. I'm going to place this over in my canner and move on to the next jar. And I totally forgot to add in the 1 tablespoon of mustard seeds. Sorry about that, guys. I totally overlooked it. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and... What did I do with it? I am going to go ahead and push those down in just a little bit so they can get submerged in with the brine. And then I'll go ahead and wipe my rim once more before I reseal my jar. And then place it into the water. So I'm going to continue the rest of the jars just like this, and I'll see you when I'm done. Alright guys, I am putting my last jar into the canner, and you want to make sure that you have at least 2 inches of water covering your jars while they're in there. Looks like I might have just a tad bit too much. If you've got too much, it will boil out a little bit. Just going to remove 1 ladle, 2 ladles of it. Yeah. I will say the recipe called for 6 jars. I ended up with 7. And I also had to make a little bit more brine. There was not quite enough to cover all of my jars. But that's okay. That happens sometimes. It's all part of the canning process. Once this reaches a full rolling boil, I'm going to time them for a 10-minute processing time. Alright guys, our 10 minutes is up, and all I'm going to do now is turn off my heat and remove my lid and allow them to sit in the hot water for an additional 5 minutes before I remove the jars. Alright guys, our pickled asparagus are out of the canner, and now all they need to do is sit here and cool down and wait for all the little seals to start popping. I will check them before I go to bed to make sure they've sealed, and any that haven't, I will transfer into my refrigerator and we'll use those immediately. Don't worry that it looks like the asparagus have floated up to the top. As these cool down, they will settle back down to the bottom and we'll have a good headspace of liquid over the tips of our asparagus. When I get up in the morning, I'm going to double check to make sure that all my seals have remained sealed through the night, and then I'll remove my rings, wash my jars really well, label them as to what they are and the date, and then put them down in my pantry where they're going to be good on my shelf from anywhere between 12 to 18 months. But that's all there is to making pickled asparagus at home. If you guys would like to see more canning videos from me or any other type of cooking recipe, I am always open to suggestions. And if I can make it happen, I certainly will do that for you. But that is going to be it for me for the day. If you guys have enjoyed this recipe, leave me a comment down below. If you guys try it out, let me know how it turned out for you. Remember to check out some of my other cooking videos. I will leave a link down in the description to them. And as always, thank you all so very much for joining me today. I've been Vault Girl. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.